On today's show, we interviewed Tony Cappuccilli, and he talked about his path, which consists of coaching high school baseball, travel baseball, junior college baseball Division I, and finally minor league baseball with the Dodgers. We talk about how his experiences as a player helped shape some of his coaching approach, the role of social media in coaching, as well as his advice for anyone looking to duplicate his path.
Welcome to another episode of the Baseball Awakening Podcast, where we dive into the raw, unfiltered, unsexy side of player development. Get ready for some knowledge bombs with your host, Geoff Rottmayer.
Welcome to the Baseball Awakening Podcast. I'm Geoff Rottmayer. Today we're sitting down with Tony Cappuccilli, a professional player developer with the Los Angeles Dodgers. Tony, how are you, sir?
Good, Jeff. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Thanks, man. Listen,
Awesome.
Tony, you are currently employed with the Dodgers as a player developer, and you've had a pretty great and a non-traditional path to where you are. And I want to talk about this. I want to talk about your entire path, but let's start this conversation with talking about your background in baseball as a youth.
I grew up in Huntington Beach, California, went to Edison High School, had a good high school career. And my senior year, signed with the University of Nevada in Reno. Went into my senior year, obviously a little concerned because I hadn't signed with anybody. My goal was to go play Division I baseball, go play professional baseball. And, going into your senior year and not having a school to go to is obviously concerning. So, I think it was March my senior year that I finally got an opportunity to sign with the University of Nevada, and had every intention on going there. And at the end of my senior year, which was pretty good, I thought I was going to have an opportunity to sign, and had some scouts tell me that I might have a chance, and it wouldn't have a whole lot of money for me to sign and pass up college because I wasn't exactly the most academic guy in the world. So I was really thinking that was going to be a possible option for me. And when the draft came, didn't get drafted, and I went into panic mode. Really thought, given the opportunity I thought I was going to have, that I just wasn't ready to go play college baseball. And really got worried about it and called Coach Powers and said, Coach, I'm not coming to school. So I need to go to junior college. I'm just not ready for that yet. And, it wasn't my time to go play Division I baseball. And we had a Connie Mack game at Long Beach State the next night, and Coach Powers is in the stands. And after the game, we went over to In-N-Out Burger and had a chat, and he, talked to me about some different, reasons why he thought I was ready. And he definitely convinced me that I needed to go to college and go to Reno. And, I think him showing that he truly cared and getting on a plane and coming down to see me and taking the time to sit down with me and have that conversation when he knew I was obviously panicked, really showed a lot to me and made me want to go play for him, knowing that, they had some really good teams, but just the fact that he cared enough to come down and see me and kind of ease my mind from the fears that I had, I thought was a really big deal. And that played a huge role in me going to play at Nevada.
That's awesome. And having coaches that can show that level of care and convince you that you were ready when you were scared, it's just awesome. So, Tony, there are a lot of kids out there that are going into their senior year and they don't have an offer, or they don't even know what they're going to do. So what advice do you have for them to say, look, guys, if you keep plugging away, do your work, do your thing, it'll all kind of come together if you keep working and you are proactive?
I mean, it's just that. And that's the problem is it's not like if you're talking to a 17-year-old kid, 18-year-old kid who has these aspirations to go play college baseball and, they see all over Twitter and all over social media that, so-and-so from this school committed here. And it seems like when you're in that position that you're the kid that hasn't committed somewhere, it seems like everybody around you is committing to schools. And then you start comparing yourself to that guy. You start thinking, well, I'm better than him. Why is he getting an opportunity and I'm not? And now you change your focus as a player to being really results based, thinking, well, if I hit some more homers or if I throw harder, I'm going to get an opportunity to go play, at a good school. And it's not even necessarily the truth. I mean, you have to be seen by schools that have a need that you can potentially fit. And if you don't, then that's just not a good fit for you or the school. So, when kids go into their senior year and they've not committed somewhere, I mean, they have to understand that they have other options in terms of Division I, Division II, Division III, NAIA, junior college. There's all sorts of routes that they can take. And you look at guys in the big leagues right now and how many guys played at all different levels of college baseball. Just because you don't go to a Division I school doesn't mean you're not going to play in the big leagues. And it doesn't mean you're not going to have a great college experience. You have to find a place that's the right fit for you, for your family, for your financial situation, for playing time. I mean, everything has to fit. Just to go to a Division I school, to say you went to a Division I school, is probably not the right reason to sign somewhere. And I think for kids that go into their senior year and are uncommitted, they should understand that they do have options. And if they just go out and focus on, continuing to prepare themselves and go out and compete and go play hard, that they're going to get an opportunity somewhere. And it may not be right where they want to right away, but there's also steps that they can take to get to where they potentially want to be.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the conversation coaches have all the time. Guys, D1 is not the end-all, be-all. So if that's the only reason you want to play, then you're probably not playing for the right reasons anyway. So let me ask you this, Tony. Was there anything that you did, were you kind of proactive in making phone calls and writing letters, or did your coach help you with that? What was the process of making that happen?
He was very helpful. I played for a guy named Tom Dugan, and I love the man to death. He did everything in his power to help me out. He made phone calls, he'd send letters, he'd fill anything and everything out that was sent to him or to me from colleges to help me move on to where I wanted to go. This was the late 90s, and, we weren't really all that into the emails, and the showcase things weren't as big as obviously they are now. So relative to where we're at, yes, he did a lot. Everybody that was around me did a lot to try and help me out. I was really fortunate to have somebody in my corner like that. It was just done kind of differently. And truthfully, like I said, I had a good high school career, and I thought I was going to get more opportunities. Mm-hmm. And, when it didn't happen, obviously, you get a little concerned that maybe this isn't going to happen. And so you start looking into, the junior colleges, and, especially back then when you're getting letters in the mail constantly from, bigger schools than I would have ever been able to play at. But, you kind of get to that mode where you start feeling yourself a little bit, thinking that, here's these letters from these big time programs, not realizing that you're never going to go play there.
Right.
So you still have to kind of stay positive and, do the work to get yourself out there, but, understand the work that you're putting in and the way you're putting yourself out in front of coaches can be detrimental to you as well. So I think staying the course and putting in the work and just having people in your corner is a really big deal.
Yeah, I agree. And I'm going to jump ahead a little bit, but, with your college coaching experience, what are your thoughts on the whole showcase and how players are doing that whole entire process? A lot of players are doing it because it's the thing, and then that's what the culture says. So what are your thoughts on that?
I've got a lot of thoughts on it, but there's a big kind of disconnect, I think, with the purpose of the showcases from a coach's perspective, the purpose of the showcase from the player's perspective, the parents' perspective, the organizers of the showcase perspective, the different camps that are out there that the kids are available to, or that are available to kids to go out and showcase their skills, their abilities. And there's a ton out there that they can do.
Right.
Problem is, we would start working these camps at other places, and you start seeing the same kids over and over again. So this oversaturation of camps puts these kids in front of us numerous times. And I mean, truth be told, you see them and you go, man, it's just not a good fit. Right. And you see him a week later at a different camp and you go, yeah, he's still not a good fit for us.
Right.
And it just keeps happening over and over again. So, one of the things that parents would ask us is, how do I get myself in front of you? And because we would get emails from kids that are all over the country, and they'd say, I really want to come to UNLV or UNM. And I said, great, come on out to a camp. We're not going to Minnesota to go recruit. So if you want to be seen by us, you're going to need to come to us and come to one of our camps.
Right.
And, some kids would do it. We'd get, kids showing up from some random places because they felt that was their best opportunity to be seen by the coaches. In terms of some of the other camps, we would tell them, hey, if you really want to go to USC, you better find out where some of the USC coaches are going to be at and go put yourself in front of them.
Right.
And in that case, now you've upped your opportunity to be seen by those guys by putting yourself there and not waiting for them to come to you.
Yeah, I agree, and I think the whole process is totally misunderstood. So anyway, let's shoot back to when you were playing and you finally made it to UNLV. What was that process like? What was the process like for you going from high school to college, knowing that you kind of had this little panic mode moment and you didn't feel like you were ready? So what was that transition like for you?
The transition for me, once I had that conversation with Coach Powers, he had put my mind at ease and I was ready to go. I felt ready to go be away from home. Reno's like 500 miles away from Huntington Beach. And, it was a good enough distance where I could go and, kind of grow up a little bit, probably not as much as I should have, but it was an opportunity to get away from home, but still be close enough where I could get back, if I needed to. So by the time I got up there, I was excited. I was ready to go. And, I had a good summer between my senior year and my freshman year in college. And, I felt pretty confident going in. And when I got out there, we start practicing and, we have our weights and conditioning stuff. And I realized there's men out there. Like these guys are 22 years old and I'm, 18. And the gap between me as a freshman and some of the seniors was just massive. Yeah. And, just the way that they moved, the how strong they were in the weight room, just the way that they carried themselves was way different than, myself and even the other freshmen that were there. So that obviously took a little bit of time to get used to because, I'm going in thinking I'm pretty legit. Right. And these guys are very quickly showing me that, that's what legit is, not what I am. Right. So I was behind where they were at. And, obviously being 3 years younger than them, 4 years younger, I mean, that's, that kind of comes with the territory. But right. I think that process of seeing those guys really made me kind of up my level of, focus in terms of my preparation and the work that I was going to have to put in, because if I'm going to compete with those guys, either for playing time or, just for a respect purpose. I mean, there's a lot of work that has to go into to show that you're actually like belonging in that team setting when you're the freshman and you can't go in thinking you're super sweet. When these guys are going to go out and they've had success for 2 or 3 years in college already. So the transition took a little bit of time, getting into the first fall. I mean, I had a good fall and I thought I was going to get some serious playing time. And then the season started up and, my freshman year was a struggle. I think I only had 60 something at bats and I was really in and out of the lineup. I just couldn't stay consistent. I was striking out a ton and, it was difficult because I was always, the guy in high school that had a good career. I hadn't struggled like that. Right. Obviously you have the ups and downs that come with baseball, but I'd never struggled, that badly. And not only struggling when I did play, I'm also dealing now for the first time with not playing consistently. So that in itself is an adjustment, and how you handle yourself. I mean, people notice that, if you're sulking, if you're that guy who is only consumed with if I'm playing or not, your teammates don't really respect you very much when they see you doing that. Right. So that was a part of that learning process. I had to learn how to not play. I mean, I had to learn how to play the game, but I also had to learn how to not play, because there is, something to that. There's something to being a good, bench player or a role guy or a supportive, part of the team. And you got to kind of learn how to do that and add value where you can. And it may not be in the lineup on a given day.
Right. And now you're going through this period where, okay, you are struggling like you probably never struggled before. It's taking an emotional toll on you. Now, this game is physical, mentally, and emotionally tough. So what was that like in terms of you trying to stay more consistent on the emotional component of the game?
I was really lucky because I had the guys that were seniors my freshman year were amazing. We had Joe Inglet and Ryan Church and Donnie Price, like guys that were really good, that were established players. We had, I think, 3 of the seniors that year ended up going to play in the big leagues, and they were outstanding teammates. Like, they weren't just good at baseball. They were incredible teammates. And they knew that it was taking its toll on me because I had high expectations of myself.
Right.
So luckily, not only are our best players, really good at baseball, now they're the best teammates and they're the best leaders. And that went a long way. So I had that emotional support from those guys because I think all of them at some point had either been through that or had seen it enough in their 3 years of college baseball to know that, this is just kind of a part of it. Like, you're going to struggle. You're going to have some really difficult times, and they were always there to help. Those guys were always there to listen. Those guys were always there to bounce ideas off of. Having those guys made me get through that first year. I don't think the emotional toll really happened until my sophomore year, because then I felt like I'd been through the difficulty of my freshman year. And, I kind of had that attitude that I was happy to be there. I was happy to have a spot on the team because I'm a freshman and I'm, playing with guys that are really good. And, it got to the point where my expectations changed a little bit, and it probably shouldn't have, but I think they changed because I felt like I wasn't contributing. I wasn't in the lineup as much as I wanted to. I had great teammates to help me get through it, but, my lack of production was not getting me any closer to being in the lineup. So sophomore year, it was kind of the same thing. I mean, I was more of an emotional mess because I wasn't playing. I still wasn't really playing. I was still in and out of the lineup. I played more as a sophomore than I did as a freshman, but, I think a part of that was because our catcher the year before, Matt Ortiz, had graduated, signed with the Cardinals, and so there was an opportunity for me to play a little bit more, but it was still a really difficult time because I still wasn't playing as well as I knew I was capable of playing.
Yeah, right. I agree. So, Tony, let me ask you this. At some point you probably said, I want to get into coaching when I get done playing. What did you learn from your coaches or even the players that you were surrounded by to help guys deal with this first 2 years of college baseball?
Yeah, I mean, they were very helpful. But again, Coach Powers was very demanding. I mean, he demanded a lot out of us in terms of, just our mentality and how we went about our business on an everyday basis. And he wasn't going to lower that standard for us. Hey, yeah, you're struggling and you're having a tough time, but hey, you got to man up. Like, this is big boy baseball. So he was there. But it also wasn't because he was trying to baby us or, anybody that was struggling. He wasn't going to lighten up or take it easy just because you were having a difficult time. It was like, in those situations, it's time to, get a little tougher instead of look for a way out. And he wasn't going to be like that crutch for us. He was going to continue to push us. And, I'm thankful that he did. If he would have lowered the standard that he would have required for us, it wouldn't have helped me out in the least bit. It would have, just given me a built-in excuse.
Right.
And so him keeping that bar raised high was really helpful. My junior year, we had Jay Ullman came in from LA Harbor College. Jay is now the associate head coach at the University of Oregon. And, when he came in, we were coming off of, my freshman year, we're good, went to the regional. Sophomore year, we weren't very good. Junior year, we were really bad with good players, but we were really bad. But Jay came in, and I feel like he was a guy that really helped us kind of have that balance between Coach Powers. There was a little bit of a buffer between Coach and us with Coach Ullman. And that really helped us. I think it helped moving forward into our senior year. He was an outstanding coach, and quite honestly, he was one of, if not the biggest reason that I wanted to go into coaching. So he left a huge impact on me. From a baseball perspective, he was outstanding, but just the leadership that he showed us, him being there for us and knowing we could turn to him if we needed it, but we also felt like we were going to work really hard for that guy. And he worked really hard for us. So we had the most, the highest respect for Coach Ullman. And I think that really helped kind of change or maybe fix a little bit of the cultural stuff going on between the sophomore and junior year and then junior into senior year.
Nice. And so whenever you are a junior, senior, you have gone through your whole own growth, and you're playing a little bit, and now you're seeing the young kids that are coming in, going through their first year struggles. How did you interact with them to kind of help them through that period? Kind of like the older guy did with you. What was your process like, and how did it work?
It was hard because my junior year was my best year statistically, and it's easy when things are going good. The problem was things were going good for me, but we were losing.
Yeah.
And I was kind of an emotional roller coaster where I could hit 2 homers in a game and have 3 knocks, and we'd lose, and I'd be miserable to be around because at the end of the day, I just wanted to win.
Right.
That was it, and if I was bad and we won, it was a whole lot better than if I went off one day and we lost. So it was really difficult to maintain that balance of me handling my own performance and still being able to, hold some of the younger guys accountable when we weren't doing things, up to the standard that had been set by Coach Powers. And then going into senior year, we were good again. We had a couple transfers. We had 5 guys on that team that played in the big leagues.
Nice.
And we had some really good players. We were good. And I think that transition of being okay as a sophomore, being really bad as a junior, and as a team, and then going into our senior year, I think that really changed kind of our motivation. So we were able to hold the younger guys to a much higher standard, and it felt like it had when I was a freshman, and the seniors were holding us to a higher standard because now we could do the same to those guys. Because the expectation was, now we've got an older team, we've got some experience, we've got a lot of returners, we've got some really good transfers. We have a chance to go off this year. And so it really was easy for us to hold those guys to a higher standard, like what was set for us, 3 or 4 years prior to that.
Nice. So now you're at the point where you're done there. Do you go and try a little bit of pro ball, or do you go into coaching? What happened after UNLV?
So I was at UNR, but
I'm sorry, UNR.
So after my senior year, I thought I had a chance to get drafted my junior year because I was, that was my best year. I didn't really catch much because we had a catcher there that was much better than me. And then my senior year, it was kind of the same thing. And we had an even better catcher, Brett Hayes, who went and played in the big leagues for quite a while. And so I DH'd quite a bit, and thought that because of my good junior year and not getting a chance to sign, I thought I had to do more as a senior. I thought I had to increase my power, had to do way more than I did the year before. So of course my power numbers go up by like 1 homer and drop like 80 points in my batting average. And so definitely wasn't going to get a chance to go and play. After my senior year, Coach Powers had asked if I wanted to stay on. He knew I wanted to coach. So he asked if I wanted to stay on in, some sort of a graduate or undergraduate role and help out. And, knowing what my aspirations were in coaching, like in hindsight, that would have been a good idea. However, I wasn't ready to be done playing baseball. So, I went online and started looking at teams in independent leagues. I was trying to find anywhere that a catcher was struggling. And, finally through some emails, I got a tryout with a team in Kenosha, Wisconsin. So I jumped on a flight to Chicago and took a Greyhound to Kenosha and slept outside the stadium. And the next morning when the manager showed up, I asked him if I could work out for him, and went out, went to a little workout, and, didn't get picked up. And I thought, well, that's no good, but I'm not ready to quit yet. So, I started kind of traveling around the Midwest, trying to find a team that would give me a shot. And I was just knocking on doors and sending emails and phone calls and trying to get a place that would at least let me try out. If they gave me a shot to try out and it didn't work, then, that's on me. But I just wanted an opportunity to work out for them. And I probably went to a dozen teams. And finally, the last team I went to was in Florence, Kentucky. And they gave me an opportunity to go play, and played independent ball with them for a little over 2 weeks. And I was catching one night and felt a pop when I threw a guy out at third base, and it tore my rotator cuff and labrum, and had to go through that whole surgery process. And, went back and finished school when I was rehabbing, and, ended up moving back home to Huntington Beach the following spring. And I started coaching, and I knew I wanted to coach, and that was kind of the opportunity I had to get into coaching. And I felt like that was a really good time for me to at least give it a shot, see how I felt about it, try to rehab, and then still possibly give myself a chance to play in the next couple of years.
Nice. And like most guys, the game's going to tell you when it's done with you. And it's hard to accept, But what was the transition like, knowing, you still wanted to play, but now you're coaching? So what was that transition like?
It was actually really easy for me because I knew I was going to do it. I knew I wanted to coach. And really, I hadn't come to terms yet that I was done playing, because my injury happened in 2003. I rehabbed, started coaching in the spring of 2004 at Edison High School, and, rehabbed for that year. I ended up signing again with another independent team in 2005, and didn't go out and play for a variety of reasons, and wound up in Seattle playing with a collegiate summer league / ex-pro guys. Did that in 2005 and kind of thought, okay, maybe I'm done, and ended up going back in 2006, and I was still coaching at Edison High School at the time. And, that was once 06 kind of happened, I figured that was it. I was done. And then I got a call from a friend of mine that was taking a team to Barcelona in the summer of 2007, and he needed somebody to come out and play first base. And so Gary Adams was coaching that team, and I said, you know what, this might be a really cool way to go out. And so I went to Barcelona for a couple weeks, played for Coach Adams, and said, all right, that's it. That was the end of it. And by that time, that's 2007. So I'd already been coaching for 4 years. So it really wasn't that big of a deal to me to be done playing and only be coaching, because I knew that's where I wanted my future to take me.
Nice. And so now, you've played for some great coaches. What were some of the things that you learned from them that helped you with your transition into coaching? What were the things that you took from them but made it your own? Because you've had a pretty successful high school coaching career.
Yeah, we were good. My first job was at Edison. I was the head coach of the freshman team at Edison High School in 2004. Matt Mosiello gave me my first job. And in 2005, I ended up being the head coach in Trout Lake, Washington, near the base of Mount Adams, in the middle of nowhere. You're talking 100 miles east of Vancouver, Washington. And, we had a street that was our home run marker, and we'd have elk running through the middle of our practice. It was beautiful. The place was really cool. It's just a small town. Ended up back in Huntington Beach in 2006, and I was assistant coach there from 2006 to 2009. I went back because that was my brother's senior year, and I thought that would be really cool to coach him his senior year. So we had some good years, and we won a couple league titles. Went to the CIF championship at Angel Stadium. We've had a couple guys from those teams make it to the big leagues. We had two guys that won national championships at the University of Arizona and one at UCLA. So we had a lot of success with some of our players moving on to, 4-year schools, into professional baseball. We've had a lot of guys that were really successful, and guys that are still playing baseball, which really is the coolest part, for us, coaching those guys when they were younger.
Right. So Tony, what was high school coaching like? You played high school baseball, you played college baseball, and then you played a little independent ball. So now you're going back to the high school rank as a coach. So what was coaching high school like?
It was a lot of fun. For one, I enjoyed being at my alma mater. I did like being at Edison. That was really cool. I loved my high school coach. Tom Dugan was awesome. And, he had this dynamic with our other assistant, Aaron Butler, who I thought was really cool. And I thought that's something I really would like to be involved in, and then when I got to Nevada and I saw how Coach Powers was, and that he really cared for us, he cared for us as men, as students, as baseball players. He wanted us to be successful, and he pushed us. And, then having Coach Ullman come in our junior year, and finding that you have this younger coach who is really good with, handling the baseball side of things, plus being, that buffer, like I was saying before, and just having that guy that you felt was really going to motivate you, really going to push you, and was there for you, in every way, that really stuck with me. I felt like I could take what, especially those three men had done and, kind of make my own identity as a coach based off of how those guys were, and hopefully taking bits and pieces of what each of them were able to do and use that, to my own advantage and hopefully impact some young men while, going out and winning baseball games. And so going back and coaching high school, obviously you have what you have. You're not out recruiting. You get what you get. And luckily we're in a really good area for some baseball talent. So we always had competitive teams, which obviously made it, very fun because we knew we were going to have a chance to be successful all the time. And it was a blast. I loved high school baseball. I had a lot of fun coaching it. There's obviously issues that come along with it, and you're dealing with parents and you're dealing with, kids going through a difficult time in their life, whether they're just, it's a maturing process. You're dealing with teenagers or with young teenage boys, and, that's not always easy. And so there's definitely challenges, but there's a lot of rewards to it as well.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that, most people do not think about that aspect. When a kid hits that teenage years, man, they are going and things are just different for them. And it's an interesting time for a young kid. And you kind of have to be sensitive to that.
Yeah.
So you know what, Tony, let me ask you this. You had a great high school coaching career, and you're saying to yourself, you know what, I think I want to get into coaching college baseball. What was that like? How did you go about that process? How did that job come up? And what was that transition like?
I really wanted to coach college baseball. Everything about it. I loved playing college baseball. That carrot of Omaha is always in front of everybody's face. And, regardless of any challenges you have, you're always kind of constantly thinking of that trip to Omaha. And I wanted that. Like, I wanted to get to that level to where we were going to be potentially competing for that opportunity every year. And so I talked to a lot of people that, I trusted and respected about, like, what's the best way to get myself into college baseball. And a lot of them had, the same, ideas about getting into junior college baseball before kind of taking that leap into Division I. And so I sent out some feelers for some junior college jobs. And, the weird part for me was after the 2009 season at Edison, like 3 days after our season, I left to go to Germany, and I was in Germany for 2.5 months. So I'm sending out these applications or these emails or feelers to junior college coaches in Southern California, and, trying to find out if they had a need for any role that I could potentially fill. And the only person that at that point had an opening was Kent Madole at Irvine Valley College. And so I jumped at it, and I was going to start the next season at Irvine Valley. And, Coach Madole was unbelievable. He's a great man. He's a great coach. We had a dean in Keith Shackelford that was just incredible for us and supportive of us. And there was challenges, geographically where we were at in terms of, the other schools that were around us. But we got out there, and I think that was where I really was able to dig in and learn how to coach. I mean, you have a lot of time. You've got limited resources and a lot of time. So you get to be really creative. You get to really focus on the development side of guys. It's not win right now. It's develop players, move them on to 4-year schools. We're going to be better if we get players that come to our place and we move them on to 4-year schools, because ultimately I think that's that kind of that bridge that guys want to take. They go to junior college because they're not ready to go to a 4-year school. So they go into the JC ranks, play, improve, and then move on. And so that really was our goal, was to move as many guys on as we could, help them develop and get them moving on. So that was a really big deal for me to get with Kent and really learn how to coach and get in and do some of the recruiting. He was really helpful with me, pushing me to finish my master's. And once I finished my master's, I was able to start teaching some classes. So I had a great setup there because I was teaching classes, I was coaching baseball. I was able to do kind of the junior college coach's dream. I mean, you're doing everything, revolving around baseball and revolving around the school. So it was really cool. Plus in the summers, I was able to go out, I went out to the Cape Cod League, summer after my first year at Irvine Valley, and I was an assistant out there for a summer. and then I spent the next 4 summers as a head coach up in the Alaska League. So I was able to kind of get that feel of having Division I players that I was coaching, upper level guys that I was coaching, while still having, my base being the junior college level, where I'm working, at the ground level of guys' ability and their desire to develop, and teaching classes. I mean, I was pretty happy with where I was at.
Very nice. And can you talk about that a little bit? A word that gets thrown a lot is development. And it's an important word. But when it comes down to it, for you, what does player development mean?
Well, I think it does get thrown around quite a bit. And there's, I think, a common misconception that if you're focusing on developing guys, that doesn't mean that you don't want to win. And it doesn't mean that you're not going to win.
Right.
It means that your focus day in and day out is to help improve that individual player. And it's not based on results. It's not based on winning and losing. It's not how well you're going to help develop a player. You don't help him more because, you're stoked that you're winning games and everybody's riding high. So we're going to get in there and we're really going to work. Or you go into panic mode because you're losing games and now you really have to improve. And so you start working harder with guys. And, I think that's where guys have to figure out, is this really a culture that we're trying to set of teaching guys how to play baseball, helping them, serving as a resource to those players? Or are we just focused on win or nothing? If you win, everything's good. If you lose, it's death. Nobody wants to be around you when you lose. And if you can focus on that development side and you show some consistency as a coach with, players coming to the field every day knowing, hey, coach wants me to get better. He wants me to improve. And that guy is a resource, not a dictator telling me I have to do this or I have to do that, or he's going to be having a bad mood today because we're not winning games. So he's not going to care about me developing, which happens all the time. And it's sad, but it's exactly what happens. And I'm not going to say I've never done it, because I have.
Sure.
I've come to the field in a bad mood because we had a bad weekend and I'm pouting and I don't want to be around anybody. So today you're not going to get any better because I'm acting like a 12-year-old.
Right.
So you have to be able to focus on that kid's development, and the process of developing him is not going to happen because you've won games. It's going to happen because you've gone in there and you've done the work with them every single day.
I love it. That's the focus of what we do at my place as well. So now you've done the JUCO route, and now you're thinking about making the jump to the Division I. What was that like?
Yeah, so I was up in Alaska, and it was kind of the same thing. I was sending feelers out, just like I had in 2009, and this time to some Division I schools, and it was time to get my hopefully get my foot in the door in Division I baseball. Stan Stolte at UNLV knew that was kind of an aspiration that I'd had, because we talked quite often. And when Tim Chambers was head coach and Coach Stolte was the pitching coach, and I played for Coach Stolte at Nevada. He called me up and said, hey, we may have this position open. Are you interested? I said, yeah, absolutely. And so we talked, and I talked to Coach Chambers, and, went through that whole process with them. And he offered me a spot when I got back from Alaska. And so I packed up my stuff and moved out to Vegas. And that was kind of the beginning of, the start for me being in Division I baseball. And it was in that volunteer role that, obviously there's some limitations to what you can do, but it was really kind of everything that I had expected in terms of being in Division I baseball, especially after coming up from, freshman head coach to, a varsity coach to junior college and summer ball, and then finally being in Division I baseball. It really was kind of everything that I had hoped and expected that it would be at that point.
Yeah, I want to talk about that. I want to kind of get your thoughts on that. It seems like social media has become a platform where coaches, kind of put themselves out there and are getting some opportunity to advance. So what are your thoughts on the social media aspect?
I have a lot of thoughts on it. And they're not all completely favorable. I think that Twitter has become like LinkedIn. It's become a resume. And I'm not saying that in a bad way. It's just what's happened. And, if somebody puts something on Twitter that's about hitting, you're going to have, 100 people love it and retweet it and, think it's the Bible. And then you're going to have 10 people that are going to go in there and they're going to dissect every single word that you've said and try to contradict whatever you put out there. And I think it was Zan Barksdale made a comment one day on Twitter about, we need less coaches that are out to try to win Twitter. And they're really quick to try and put other guys down because of the information. Ultimately, people just want to make it. Like, they just want to make it to where they've accomplished what they want to accomplish. And that might be just owning a facility and having a reputation for being a really good hitting instructor. It might be a guy that's coaching junior college baseball or junior varsity baseball who wants to coach in Division I, like I did. It might be a guy that wants to, up his level of knowledge and educate himself a little bit more. And so there's a lot of really good information out there. It's just, the problem is that information is being used probably incorrectly by a lot of people. And, I was thinking about, I think it was like 2006 or 2007, I saw Tim Corbin speak at the ABCA. And I went back to Edison. I told Steve Lambright, our head coach, that, hey, we got to do this, this, and this because Tim Corbin does it. And those guys are really, really good. And he's like, yeah, those are great ideas, but we don't have the resources to do that. And so I think people see things on Twitter and wherever else, and they want to replicate that in their practice setting, but they don't have the athletes to do that. They don't have the resources to do that. They don't have the time to do that. So they have to use these things they see in their own way. And then I think some of the important messages end up getting pushed aside for time's sake. So how that information is used on Twitter by coaches, I think is really, really important. I think there's a lot of great information out there. There's a lot of guys that are putting out great information. You just have to be really aware of how you're using that information that you find. In terms of the guys that are out doing it, that are out putting it on there. I mean, if you're confident in the information that you have, by all means, go out and do it. Go out and send out as much information as you want. There is a part of me that there's a few things that you never see on Twitter. You never see people talking about recruiting. Nobody's out giving tips on recruiting. We have guys talk about hitting and pitching and catching, all this stuff. And ultimately, the only thing that matters is recruiting.
Right.
You don't need to be a great pitching coach if you recruit really good pitchers.
Right.
So, that really helps kind of negate your inability to coach pitchers if you have guys that are really good pitchers. And so there's things that I think nobody's giving away secrets that are going to make them, really high level winning coaches, because why would you do that? If you're at a place that's not winning and you're looking for ways to win, are you really going to go to Twitter to find those things? Or are you going to just seek out the people who are doing the winning that you want to be doing and pick their brains and really get in there and dig into the information and the content that they have? So I think it's kind of a double-edged sword. I think there's a lot of really good aspects to it, but I also think that there is some danger in that, just in the way that the information is used and the information that's being put out there. You got to realize if you're putting information out there, you are putting your name on that, and you better be able to stick to that, because somebody's going to come back in 3 years and go, hey, dude, you said this about hitting, and now you're saying this that completely contradicts it. So you better be able to put that stamp on there, or be able to go back in time and erase that tweet you sent 3 years earlier, because now you've learned something that changes your way of thinking about a certain movement.
Yeah, and I feel maybe the social media has, I don't know, man, gotten out of control a little bit. I mean, if that's fair to say.
It has, and I'm careful with how I say that, because
Me too.
I really don't want to offend people, because there is a lot of really good information out there.
I agree.
I follow a lot of people on Twitter because I want to see what they say. I think that there's a lot of great information that we can all learn from.
Right. And
trust me, there's been plenty of things I've seen where I said, I really like that wording, because half of it's not like what you know, it's can you reach that kid?
Right.
If you can't reach the kid and get the kid better, you're not really doing them a bit of good. So why not figure out if you can find ways to, maybe word it differently based off what you're reading, because that may be the thing that gets through to a kid, and not necessarily the movement that you're trying to get them to understand or to make.
Yeah, I'm with you, man. And I feel, picking up the phone and talking and help get questions answered, because, you can misconstrue a lot of things that you read, and this has caused the arguments.
I think there's a place in the game, especially nowadays with the way that the game is evolving, and guys are seeing that, people are being successful in moving their careers forward because they are putting out really great content on Twitter.
Right.
There's guys that are making a really good name for themselves because they're putting out legit content that is helping people from, youth ball all the way into professional baseball.
Right.
And if you're able to have that kind of content and that kind of an audience, then by all means, you need to use that, and you need to expand this game as much as you possibly can.
I agree. Let's go back to your UNLV coaching days. What was that transition like? At this point, you've done the high school route, you've done the JUCO route, and now you're at a Division I program. What was that transition like for you?
It was weird because in junior college, we had, basically unlimited time. So you're out there on the field for a lot of hours, for a lot of days. And all of a sudden you get to Division I baseball and you're limited by your hours, by your days, by the time that you can have contact with the players. So, you have to be really creative with your time and how you structure that time so that they're maximizing the time that you have, and they're getting the most out of every rep, and they're getting the most out of your time that you can spend either individually or with a small group. And I think that part of it, the time management, helps with your creativity. If you have this unlimited time, you're always looking for different ways to do things so that they don't get stale. When you're kind of, pigeonholed by the time constraints, then you're in a position where you have to get creative and find out, how can I use this time that I have to make multiple guys really good at a couple of different things at once. And that's fun. Like, that creativity is really fun. Especially working with people who are open to you being creative, and they're not just stuck in that, we're going to go take batting practice and you're going to get 4 rounds of 5 and then we're done. And then you're going to go shag. Can you do other things, like situationally? Can you get something out of the defense aspect while BP is going on, or the base running aspect? And again, you can start to do different things and get really creative. So that part was a lot of fun, but it was also a big change for me going into, Division I baseball. The other part is, like, it is difficult when you're at, when I'm at UNLV, to take guys and get them better in places that they may not necessarily be comfortable at. I remember we had a kid that, was a third baseman and ended up really just DHing because our third baseman was a dude, and he DH'd for a little bit during the course of that year. And then we're in the regionals at Oregon State, and he had to play second base due to an injury, and he hadn't played there all year long. And the first hitter that comes up is Michael Conforto. I thought, if he hits a ground ball at him, like, this dude's going to die. And I was scared to death because, Conforto's this big, dude in the box. And I'm thinking, if he pulls a ground ball, this is not going to be good. And I realized we didn't prepare him for that situation. So I think that part of it kind of made me think a little bit more in terms of, how can we prepare guys to be in other situations that they may not be comfortable playing, or, hey, worst case scenario, you might have to go play second base or first base, and we're going to have to really work with you so that you're comfortable enough to be serviceable there.
Nice. And you were a part of the hitting program there, right?
I helped out. I had Kevin Higgins was pretty much in charge of the hitters. Him and Tim Chambers were really working. So, I actually had a really good role there in terms of, Tim would coach third, Higgy would be at first, and I'd be in the dugout with guys, and, we'd chat, we'd go over whatever charts, we'd just have a conversation before they'd get out on deck. And, once they'd go to be on deck, I wasn't going to talk to them. And now it's their time to get ready to hit. It's their time for their at bat. But they also knew, there's nothing worse than feeling like after you strike out and you're walking back to the dugout that you're going to get blown up for striking out.
Right.
So that was nice, I think, for them, because they knew that, hey, hit a homer or strike out and pat you on the butt and, go get them next time.
Yeah.
And because there's not a need to blow them up because they already knew they struck out. So me telling them is not going to make them not strike out.
Right.
So I think the role in terms of what I was doing was hopefully helpful for guys, preparing for their at bat.
Yeah, that's an important part. Can you talk a little bit about that? What the conversation like to help a player develop their approach?
I think it was different for each guy. You can't. It's really difficult to have like a situational, conversation with a guy, because you don't know what that situation is going to be like once he gets up to bat. He might be, third or fourth up, and we're just sitting there, and he might just be looking at a chart that I'm keeping. He may be trying to look for some tendencies that the pitcher's, potentially tipping some pitches. There's different things that they'd be looking for. And some guys really want to have a conversation. Some guys don't. Some guys just want to stand there. Some guys don't want to go anywhere near me. So each guy preparing for their at bat, I think you have to let them prepare the best way for them to be successful in their at bat, for them, not for you as the coach. Right. That you feel better saying, well, I talked to him before his at bat and I told him to look out for a breaking ball if he gets to a 2-1 pitch. Like, come on, man, that's what you want him thinking about when he gets in the box in that moment. Right. And not only that, knowing that situation could change from, a ball in the dirt, advancing a guy from, first to second, and now he's going to rely more on, breaking balls or rely more on fastballs. So the situation changing so quickly, I think, changes that conversation. And so being aware of that, I think if you get too specific with guys at that level, like you can go over some tendencies, but, a lot of it may just be, hey, a subtle reminder, and then they get to go on deck, and then you're not talking to them anymore.
Yeah. So what about with a young guy, you got a young guy that's 17, 18 years old, and he had the opportunity to play Division I. What's the conversation like to help them understand what it means to get ready for that bat?
I don't want to have a conversation with a guy about that, because I want, if it's a game day, whether it's, in Arizona with our guys right now with the Dodgers, or UNLV or New Mexico, that guy's got to figure out how he can prepare himself to play that day and what he needs to do. And if it turns into him doing what I think he needs to do so that I think he's prepared to play, then why does that player feel any better going into that game? He just basically did what he was told to do, and he didn't get an opportunity to prepare the way that makes him feel like he's most prepared to play that day. So, I want a guy to have whatever his routine is on a game day, whether, it includes an offensive type routine or defensive or both. When we go out on the field to take batting practice, we are going to structure that BP so that you're, accomplishing goals or tasks. You keep it kind of task oriented. You keep their brain kind of turned on, and they're not just trying to, take G-hacks all day and leave Earth for 5 rounds. I mean, you really want that guy locked into something, but leave him alone. What are you going to tell him during batting practice? That he didn't execute to move the runner from second to third? Like, is that going to make him play better that day? I highly imagine that that's not going to make him all of a sudden have a better game. So part of it is helping them figure out their routine, having some structure like in batting practice, and then letting them go out there and, take control of their day, and then live with the consequences of their lack of preparation or the excitement and the success that they've had because they were prepared and they went out and they executed in the game.
Nice. So when you talk about routines, was there a process where you kind of sat a guy down and help him develop a routine that works for him?
I think when it comes to routine, I think guys start to feel like maybe there are specific drills that get them moving in a way that helps them, maybe gives them some subtle reminders of some, mechanical cues. Maybe there's just drills that they feel help them move better or help them get loose or, whatever it is. But I think guys kind of find that on their own through the course of, just our daily work. You start to see that you really like how you feel after you do this drill or you do this movement or whatever it might be. And that helps you get yourself ready to go out and hit. I think you have to be aware of that fine line between routine and superstition, because some guys get so just mentally domed up because they don't complete their routine. And at that point, it's reached a superstition, and it's no longer a routine to get them ready to play. It's a superstition that they have to do this. Otherwise, they're not going to be able to go out and perform. So if you help them to set a routine, maybe talk over some things with them, but ultimately they have to be the ones to kind of set that routine to get them ready to play that day.
Right. And a lot of kids, younger guys, and even college guys, they need to be reminded to be aware of what they're doing and what they're feeling so that they can say, you know what, yeah, this needs to be a part of my routine.
Yeah, and that's an easy suggestion from the coach. If he sees a guy doing a drill and, his path or his direction or, whatever else he's working on looks really good in that given drill, it's really easy to suggest, hey, maybe that's something you should do like in a daily routine just to, overemphasize, this feel or whatever it is. And I think they're more receptive to hearing that in that moment of, them having some success doing a drill.
Yeah, I agree. So now, Tony, you get an opportunity to to go work for the Dodgers. Talk a little bit about that process and then what that transition was like.
Well, so after UNLV, I went to University of New Mexico. I spent 3 years there with Coach Birmingham and Ken Hockamy and Buddy Goldsmith, Dan Spencer. I was really fortunate to be around some really good coaches, and I was. We had a really good thing going at New Mexico. There was a culture there that was really offense heavy. Like we really hit, and that was a lot of fun because we were scoring a lot of runs. And so after my last year at New Mexico, it's kind of that same thing. It's that transition year of, what am I going to do next? Like now I'd been a volunteer assistant for 4 years at 2 different schools. And, it was really time for me to do something else. I didn't know what. I had no idea what that was going to be. And my wife, now, we were packing up to go home for Thanksgiving, and I had an email from Gabe Kapler, and just said, hey, shoot me a text when you get a shot and or when you get a minute, and let's chat. Okay, whatever. And I'm thinking, because we had some guys in New Mexico that year that were good, that were potential draft guys, that he probably, given his position with the Dodgers at the time, maybe wanted to go over some of our players. And, he started asking me some questions, and then I'd get a call from somebody else, within the player development department, and, talk to some people. And it actually took me quite a while to even realize that I was being interviewed for a job. I thought, man, these guys are really nice and, having some good conversations. And, a lot of them, every time I talk to Cap, I'm like, man, that guy's pretty legit. And, finally got to that point where I realized, hey, I'm actually interviewing right now. And we went through this kind of process for a couple months, and I ended up not getting that job. I found out the week before our opening game, my last year at New Mexico, that I didn't get the job in 2017. And so, I figured, okay, we'll just get through the season and kind of see what happens. So went through that season, and then I got a call back from Gabe in July or August of 17 after our season, going through the summer camps and stuff at New Mexico. And he said, hey, we had a job that opened up. Would you be interested? And I said, yeah, absolutely. And so kind of talked to him for a little bit. And, a few days later, he called me back and offered me the job. And I, talked to my wife about it. And, we were packing up a couple days later, moving to Arizona.
Nice. So what was that like? What was the difference? Because at this point, you have been at all levels. What was the transition like? And what was the difference in what the player at the professional level was like?
Truthfully, it's weird to admit it, but that was the most intimidating jump for me to make because I hadn't played at that level.
Right.
And there was obviously a little bit of an intimidation when you see some of the guys that are around. And then you start talking to other coaches and you realize, this guy played in AA and this guy was in the big leagues and this guy was here, this guy's first round draft pick. And, I'm like, yeah, I played independent ball for 2 weeks. And ultimately it gets to a point where it doesn't matter. Yeah. And we have a really great structure within our organization. So nobody ever makes you feel like that matters because we've got a number of guys that didn't play professional baseball. And so nobody ever makes that feel. It was just probably my own insecurity and my own, feeling going into it. Like, oh my God, I'm a little bit intimidated by this environment right now.
Sure.
And then you get to know everybody and understand that you're all really seriously on the same team, doing things the same way. And there's so much everything is a cohesive effort to make everybody better. And once I got to that point, that intimidation was kind of gone. And then you're going, wow, this is really cool. Like, I get to put on a Dodger jersey every day, and I get to go to work at this beautiful complex, and I'm surrounded by just incredible people with amazing leadership. You know, what could be better than this? I mean, it's been awesome since day one, given the people that we have in our organization. You start to realize some of the things that you were going through in college baseball with, maybe different types of funding or not as much funding, and the things that you have at your disposal on the professional levels that you didn't at a mid-major college or junior college or high school level. So then there's just a lot more going on, and it's really interesting, and it's a constant learning process every single day.
Very cool. And so who was the one guy that took you in when you got there? And what was the thing that he stressed the most for someone that was in your position?
One of the, I think, 2 weeks after I got there, we kind of finished the end of the Arizona League season, and then we were going to start our instructional league. And our catching coordinator, Ryan Cienko, we sat down and went over some catching stuff. And I love coaching the catchers. Like, that to me is the most fun. I love that relationship between the pitcher catcher, try to set game plans, stuff like that. And, going over things with Ryan, I was blown away at, first of all, how detailed he was and how he kind of shifted my thinking with certain things of catching based off of like evidence that he had. And I was blown away. And that was my first experience going, oh my God, this is some high level stuff.
Right.
And, sitting there and being able to pick his brain and, being able to, I can send him a text and send him a video of a guy and say, hey, what do you see here? And, he's so good at what he does, and he's able to communicate very openly about things that need to be done with guys. Hopefully makes or allows him to have that trust in me if he's not around, that I can work with our guys in Arizona based off of the work that he's already put in with guys. That preparation goes so far, especially with the younger catchers, but being able to pick his brain all the time has been really helpful for me.
Yeah, I can imagine. So when the players are there and you get them for the first time, what's that like? You've got the young guy, you've got guys from the different countries. What was it like trying to get those guys to trust you?
Well, I think, like you mentioned, starting off with the players from different countries, going in that you're going to have Latin American players. And so if you go in and you have, no ability to speak or understand any Spanish whatsoever, I feel like that shows a lack of interest and effort on your part.
Yeah.
If you go into this thing and you know that you're going to have some players that aren't going to speak English, and they know you don't speak Spanish or aren't fluent, you need to be able to at least know enough words to communicate with them. And I think that doing that for a lot of the Latin American players, I feel like that gains some trust and respect that you've at least given it an effort to learn enough to have some sort of a communication with those guys so that they feel more comfortable, because they're in a different country. They're out of their, natural element. And really they have coaches that care. And if you learn a little bit of Spanish, I think it really shows that you care to be able to interact with those guys and really effectively coach them and reach them in a level that's comfortable for those guys, and they're able to really work. So I feel like that in regards to like the Latin American players, I feel like that's a really big step for coaches. Just everybody in general, though, showing that you're there to help assist them get better, I think is a really big deal. I think a lot of guys are guilty of, and I've done it myself, where you go out and you really want to just put your stamp on a guy.
Right.
You want to help that guy out. You want to be the guy that gives him the fix, that gets him to the big leagues and gets him paid. And, he's going to come back and thank you years down the road when he's a Hall of Famer. And everybody has that thought. And I feel like in our organization, we don't have that, that goes around. I don't feel like there's a lot of guys that just have to put their stamp on guys, because I think the overwhelming feel around our cages is that you want to be there to support their growth and their development. And you don't have to be the guy to put a stamp on them. When the players feel like all you care about is putting your personal stamp on that guy as a hitter, I feel like they kind of back off a little bit. If you show that you're just there to help them and be a resource for them, I think they gain some trust and some respect, and that opens that line of communication with those players, and they're way more receptive to your ideas if you're able to bounce things back and forth.
When you get to that level, now these guys, they're getting paid to be there. So it's really kind of a different thought process. It's a different conversation when you have guys that are being paid to perform. So knowing that, did that change your approach and how you coach?
Yeah, I honestly, I had to be reminded to stay patient, because I spent 14 years with that winning in mind. And not that winning is not important, because you look at the Dodgers from the bottom to the top. We had, I think, all 6 of our affiliates in the States went to the playoffs last year in the minor leagues, and 3 of them won league titles. Yeah. So it's not a winning thing, because we win plenty, and our big league team did, pretty well also. It's not necessarily like a winning thing. It's creating a culture, creating an environment where players can go out and become, as good as they possibly can. And so for me, going from an environment where it's stressing win and develop so that you can do the things that we need you to do so that we can win, to going to an environment where it's, hey, let's develop this guy and all of our guys so that they can move up in levels and be, a big supportive piece of the Los Angeles Dodgers, and hopefully move up and become big leaguers and have a great career. And ultimately, I think at college, it's, you're telling them what they need to do to be successful. And in professional baseball, you're that resource, and you're there to ask them, how can you help them to reach their goals? What do you need from me to help you out, versus this is what you need me to do, or this is what you need, this is what I'm going to do to help you. So it's that question in terms of, asking them what they need versus explaining to them what they need.
Right. So Tony, I got to ask you, if you go on the internet, you're going to read about how major league teams are behind in time when it comes to information. What are your thoughts on that?
I mean, compared to who?
Exactly.
Like who are you comparing? I mean, who can you compare those teams to? They put more money into, facilities and the players and technology. They've got more invested than anybody else, including colleges, including, private hitting facilities. The beautiful thing I think right now is that there's a role for each one of those aspects. There's a huge role for high school baseball, and you see kids that are leaving high school to go focus on playing travel ball. And you got kids that, their biggest thing they need to do is tweet out their, honored and humbled to announce my commitment to this school tweet. And, they leave colleges because the grass is greener on the other side. And, they only focus on who they feel they can trust because of who they're paying. And everybody's trying to discredit everybody else and put everybody else down, when what are we really doing? Aren't we just trying to help kids get better and help them achieve whatever their goals are? The kid's goal is to go play at a Division III school and get a great education. Then by all means, that's your job as a coach to help them reach that goal. So to say that the big leagues are behind, I really think everything trickles down from there in terms of what the organizations are trying to do to help promote the game, help improve the game. They're setting the trends. I don't know where else the trends would be started from, other than the fact that there's so much available information that anybody can look up, that anybody can find online. You can get numbers to support any argument that you want, whether it's, hey, ground balls are better, fly balls are better. Like, somebody's going to find a number that's going to support whatever argument they want to have. They're going to use video, and they're going to manipulate their wording to make people believe whatever it is they feel they should believe. And like, dude, we're all on the same team. We're all trying to develop players. We're all trying to move players on. Like, it doesn't have to be competitive in everything that we do. Like, I've coached enough against some of my best friends in the world, like guys that were in my wedding and I was in their wedding, and they know flat out, if we're playing you, like, I hope we crush you in every aspect.
Right.
And then afterwards, you're going to go and buy me a Diet Coke, and we're going to talk about it, and I'm going to run my mouth a little bit because it's fun and we're best friends.
Right.
But like, other than that, it's like there's a competitive nature that everybody has, that they have to be the one to share information or to discredit somebody else, so that now they're the ones that are getting all of the attention. And I think it's sad, and it needs to be, hopefully toned down a little bit, and people can just go back to coaching because they love coaching and having an impact on people's lives, which is the only reason we got into this business anyway, I hope.
Right. So the Dodgers spent a lot of money on the analytics and technology. Had that helped you communicate or coach better? How has it helped?
Well, it's opened my eyes quite a bit, because those things, that the resources that we have, that we really try and use, or even other teams try and use. I didn't have exposure to those things beforehand. It was really, my exposure to those were, again, going on Twitter or going online somewhere and seeing something about launch angle, spin rate, all these different things. We never had the time or the resources to get into, the pitch development and the sequencing and, some of the things that everybody's doing nowadays, because that's the only way for you to compete against other teams, right, is to have that information and use that information. We didn't have that in college baseball or high school baseball. So we were stuck in an older time, I think, in college baseball, as are a lot, because that equipment, that, technology that everybody's using, it's really expensive and not everybody can afford it.
Right.
So it is a luxury to be able to have that. So for me, not having that experience, I've had to sit down with numerous people and say, hey, like, talk to me like I'm 7, because I don't know what this is. I've never seen this. I've never been exposed to it. So remember, my playing days were done, 15 years ago, 16 years ago. So I don't have experience from that as a player or as a coach. So these things, and it does help, because it keeps you in that mindset that you're constantly learning. You're constantly having to be aware of the things that are going on and the way that decisions are made, based on the fact that there are numbers and there's evidence and there's a sample size to back up what you're actually doing.
What about the player? Do they like it?
Yeah, they do. Yeah. Because they know that it's ultimately only going to help them. There's no reason to fight it. They've got resources at their disposal that are going to help make them better players. And there's no reason whatsoever for them to fight those numbers that can do nothing but help them out.
Yeah. What about the human element? If a pitcher says my strength is inside, but the data says otherwise, how does that factor in?
The numbers aren't lying.
Yeah.
And so if you're a pitcher and you feel like, hey, I need to run 2 seams in on this guy's hands and I'm going to tie him up, but the numbers say that your 2 seam sucks and it's going to get crushed, then at some point you have to sit back and go, okay, do I think I'm, really good, spotting up my 2 seam and getting in on a guy, or do I think that the numbers are lying? And if you keep getting hammered in there, then I'd probably go back and look at the numbers and say, yeah, there's data to suggest that my 2 seam's not as good as I really think it is.
Yeah.
So it gets back to guys being able to take the data that's available to them and use it to their advantage by understanding what they do well, understanding what their opponents don't do well, and then finding that marriage between those two things of setting a game plan of how you're going to go get a guy out or how you're going to go hit off a guy.
Yeah. So when you get a kid, let's say a high school kid, and he's away from home and it's a different environment for him, and even the guys that are kind of coming from overseas, they've got to kind of get into, figure out a routine that works for them. They got to figure out, who they are and all that stuff. So what's that like for you as a coach, helping a young kid understand what they have to do to get ready to play every day?
I think showing the guys that you're going to allow them to play and they're not going to be micromanaged at all aspects of their game, I think that goes a long way. And I think showing that you're going to allow them to, figure out if doing what they've done for their entire career or doing what's got them to that point, if they continue to do that, are they going to be successful, or are they going to need to make some adjustments off of that? If a kid comes in on day one, you start changing everything about his swing, is there going to be buy-in to the need to make that swing change without allowing him to go out and fail?
Yeah.
And is the kid going to be receptive if he's never failed? Why would he go out and have, be an All-American in college and get into pro ball, and then we want to change his swing? And if I'm that kid, I'm going, wait, why are you switching what I've been doing that made me an All-American?
Yeah.
And you've got to allow guys to fail. And the problem is, if you don't do that, then where does the kid's belief in you believing in him come from? And where does he feel like you really just want to have your stamp on him so that he does it your way, so that you can say, hey, I made this guy better? So I think giving it some time to allow the kid to go out and do what he naturally does and allow him to fail, it will open up his desire to be coached even more.
Right. Does there come a time where, let's say, the kid is just struggling miserably? Do we suggest, hey, maybe we need to try to take a look at something or try something different?
I think the first question, I think, is to ask the kid what he feels.
Yeah.
And because, again, they're always going to, the first thing that a lot of hitters are going to want to do is they're going to want to go to the video. They're going to want to go see, okay, what am I doing?
Yeah. And
what's my swing look like? And they're going to want to break down everything about their swing. And then some of the really important questions are never really going to get asked or answered. How's your timing? What's going on in your head? Are you in swing mode, or are you, defensive? Are you waiting to identify a pitch and decide, okay, yeah, I'll swing? Or is it, swing until you identify it's something you want to take? Is the pitch selection awful? It's sometimes that answer is so simple of, hey, you're not getting results because you're swinging at bad pitches.
Yeah.
Or you're taking good pitches. And sometimes those things will answer the questions. And then just by asking the player, like, hey, what are you feeling right now? Or how do you feel in the box? Or, what do you feel really good about? We'll start that conversation. And I feel like that conversation is something that will really open up the opportunity to start to suggest some things, versus pulling a guy aside and saying, hey man, like, you're hitting 105 right now. You need to change what you're doing because I said so. If he doesn't want to change, he's not going to change. If he feels really comfortable, he's just not getting hits. You don't know how that kid's feeling unless you ask. He might feel really good in the box. He's just not getting results. And if you start tinkering with the swing, maybe he doesn't feel as good anymore. And now he doesn't feel good and he's not getting results. And then he's pressing even more. So having that conversation, I think, is really important before you go in and start making wholesale changes. And understanding that player as a person and knowing what they respond to is a very important key to figuring out how they're going to learn the best way possible.
Yeah, I love that, because really that applies at all levels.
I think so. I don't see what's wrong with asking a kid how he's feeling in the batter's box.
Right.
He may be really, struggling and have other things going on through his head because for reasons that we don't even know, because we didn't care to ask.
Right.
So I feel like just starting at that point, and then if you ask, at least you show that you care, at least show the kid that you care about what's going on in his head. You're not just saying, hey, like, your swing looks like garbage right now, we're going to change it. Because if you ask him what he's feeling, you ask what he's going through at that moment, he may be more open to you saying, you know what, I kind of noticed this in your swing. How is that feeling right now? And let's talk about this. Your backside's doing whatever. And you can have that conversation because, you've opened up, showing that you care to hear how they're feeling about it.
Yeah, I love it. And that was a game changer for me when I figured that out. It changes the relationship and the conversation when a kid knows you care. Because there are personal things that you don't see and that you don't know that can impact a player's performance.
Yeah, you have no idea what's going on in that player's life until you ask them what's going on. If they're struggling, you can keep it baseball related. And if they feel like they need to open up and talk about other things, they've got the floor. That opportunity is there for them. But if you never ask them what they're feeling in the box and you're just purely looking at mechanics, which is what everybody talks about, that's all they're going to see on social media. That's all they're going to hear on TV is people talking about mechanics and, what's the best, whatever angles and all that stuff. I mean, yeah, like it is important, but at the same time, if that kid starts the conversation with, hey, I feel really uncomfortable in the box right now, or I feel really tied up on anything with velocity, like then you can start getting into a couple other things that may lead to a mechanical discussion, but it may not be a mechanical thing. It may be a mindset shift that, putting him on time may help solve a mechanical issue he's having.
Yeah, absolutely. Tony, I don't want to take up too much more of your time, but if I'm a guy listening to this conversation and I'm saying, this guy had a pretty cool route, and I think I want to try to duplicate and see where it takes me, what advice do you have for them?
I think first recognizing that, I think it was Gary Vaynerchuk who made the comment in some colorful language on the Joe Rogan podcast that if you're lucky enough to be good at what you love, then you need to be this tunnel vision dude who focuses to an extreme level on what you're doing. And I think for a lot of coaches, we're really, really lucky to be able to do, what we love. I didn't make great money when I was coaching junior college from coaching baseball. It came from teaching classes. I mean, realistically, my first actual paycheck from coaching baseball was when I was like 37 years old.
Yeah.
So you have to go through some of those things, outside of summer ball and stuff like that, like an actual salary. I was 37. So you have to kind of go through the steps, and you can't rush that process.
Right.
And you can't compare yourself to other people because other people have had completely different paths. If you're a guy that went off in the SEC and you're a first-round draft pick and you played pro ball for a few years, you might get hired as a recruiting coordinator right when you get done because it's happened at some good schools. But if you're not, if you're the guy that didn't play Division I baseball, or you're a guy that played, very sparingly in Division I baseball or whatever it was, and you didn't go out and play pro ball, your path may be different. And that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. You don't have to be a head coach in the SEC. Everybody wants to be a head coach in the SEC. Obviously, why wouldn't you?
Right.
But that might not be your path. Maybe it is down the road, but it doesn't mean it has to be right now. So to me, if I'm a young coach and I'm just getting in, I'm going to figure out what level is best for me, whether it's high school, whether it's junior college. I want to surround myself with the best people possible. I want to listen to the best people possible. I'm going to reach out to as many people as I can and try to get information on things that are really interesting to me. I'm going to become as good as I can at as many things as I can, so that when you get to a point where you really have to specialize, you've at least got a good, solid foundation of knowledge for different areas of the game. I'm not going to go and coach the outfielders to the same level I can coach the catchers. I wasn't a runner. I've never played in the outfield since I was 11 years old. I wouldn't feel comfortable. I just catch the ball before it hits the ground. That's really what I know about outfield.
Right.
So ultimately, like, you find the things that you're passionate about and learn as much as you can about it, and meet people, introduce yourself to people, send emails, go to conferences, go to conventions, go do those things, take notes, go over your notes and figure out what's relevant to you. Do research, look on Twitter, because there are great resources on there. Go out, watch some baseball, and really figure something that you want to focus on, and just watch that dude, and don't get caught up in the scoreboard or any of that stuff. Just focus on one aspect of one thing and get really good at that. And again, like, you don't have to be that guy that jumps into his dream job right away. That doesn't happen very often.
Right.
So don't be afraid to take your time and work your way up, because we all have different paths to get wherever we're going.
Yeah, and I think the other thing is, guys need to be reminded, and I do this. I need to do this too, and people just have to be reminded that wherever you are, just make the most out of it. Okay, maybe you don't have the biggest budget or the latest technology that you want, but this is where you get creative, man, and you learn, and don't think just because, if I go to this school and I have all this stuff, that it's going to be a better fit. So make the most out of where you are in the situation that you're in.
Yeah, I remember seeing Pat Murphy speaking in Philadelphia at the 2008 ABCA convention, and he made a great comment. He said, the big time baseball is where you're at right now. Like, this moment where you are is big time. Like, hey, if you're coaching junior varsity baseball in the middle of nowhere, like, the big time for you is that JV team wherever you're at.
Yeah.
And nothing else matters.
Yeah.
Coach your guys, make them better players, help them become better men, and coach those guys like that is your big league team. It is. There's not how LSU does has no impact on you whatsoever or your JV players.
Right.
So just coach those guys and then just be a fan of the rest of it. Like just focus on what you have right in front of you and make that part big time.
I love it. So if I'm a young guy, Tony, and I'm listening, when it comes to learning stuff, there's so much information out there. So how do I know what's good and what's going to help me get to where you are and what's not good?
To me, I feel like if you want to coach, you need to be in the dugout. You need to be coaching. And whatever level you're at, go coach a lot of baseball. Go coach travel ball. When I was coaching junior college baseball, I was a head coach up in Alaska, so I had some Division I players, were the junior college players, and I was coaching a 13 and under travel ball team and doing lessons like crazy because, need some income.
Right.
But you're in the dugout, and I don't care if it's at a 13U tournament over Memorial Day, you've got things that you have to deal with. Maybe it's prepubescent teenagers, or it's parents that are upset that they paid to play in a tournament and now they want to talk to you in the parking lot, or it's a kid that's at a Division I school that you're coaching in the summer that can't go because he failed a class and has to go to summer school. Now you've got to replace them. All those different things that you have to deal with as a coach, you're going to find in different levels. So you have to be able to handle all of those situations eventually at some point in your career. So it's really difficult to say like there's one way. I would, if I'm a young coach, I want to go find a summer ball job, because to me, you're dealing with a lot of different aspects of coaching.
Yeah.
There's a different social side. You're dealing with kids who, they don't care if you win a summer ball, league championship. They want to go out and get their name out. They want to perform. They want to have fun being where they're at. They want to get to know new teammates from different schools. Go manage in some summer ball league somewhere, because now you're going to start to see a whole lot of different things going on that you've got to manage, and not necessarily your goals fitting in with the same goals of the players. So it's a really interesting dynamic when you go out and coach summer ball that I think is a really important key in development for coaches, in my opinion.
Yeah, and I think maybe also, one thing that I've noticed when you pick up the phone and you call a coach, most of the baseball people, at least from my experience, are willing to entertain a conversation. So don't be afraid to ask for help.
Exactly. You look at some of those guys that are head coaches in some big conferences, or go look at some of the managers that are in the minor leagues and look at their resume and see where they've been. And it's incredible. Some of these guys have been to some places that you're not thinking that the head coach in the SEC spent time at this Division III school in wherever,
right.
But they did. And they spent a lot of time at some of those schools. You've got guys that are big league managers that spent a huge portion of their career in the minor leagues, and finally got an opportunity to be in the big leagues, and now they're running away with that. So you've got different people, like I said earlier, that took different paths, and you just can't compare your path to it because you don't know where you're going to be. 5 years ago, I would have never thought I'm working for the Los Angeles Dodgers.
Right.
I mean, are you kidding? Like, that's ridiculous to me.
Right.
And so you better believe that I feel like I'm unbelievably lucky to be in the position that I'm in because of where I've been. And if I hadn't been in the positions that I've been in, I would not appreciate as much of being where I am now.
Right.
So you have to go through that stuff in order to really appreciate where you're at. And I felt the same way when I was at New Mexico, having, been through where I was and then getting to UNM, and same thing at UNLV, and same thing at Irvine Valley. Every time I always felt really fortunate to be there based off of, where I was before I got to that point.
Well, Tony, man, I appreciate you coming on. This has been a great conversation. Thanks again.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
I'm Geoff Rottmayer. Thank you for listening to our conversation on the Baseball Awakening podcast. Stay tuned for our recap show tomorrow.